My story started when I was 7. I lost my dad when I was 4 and my mom, I was 6. I was going to 7.
I was barely a teenager between the ages of 8 and 14. So I think it's called statutory rape because it's less of force and more of coercing.
Rape and defilement have gone on for years, but how many people see it as anything worth attention? United Nations Children Emergency Fund reported in 2015 that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 10 boys in Nigeria had experienced sexual violence before the age of 18. According to a survey by Positive Action for Treatment Access, more than 31.4% of girls said that their first sexual encounter had been rape or forced sex of some kind. What is rape?
Rape is described by the English law as the unlawful act of penetration, either oral or vaginal, of a male or female by another individual, and of course for which there is no consent. Rape is a violent act, it's an aggressive act, and even though the perpetrator of the rape may not exactly have a weapon, it still doesn't mean that they cannot use some level of aggression or violence, even if it's through intimidation or through threatening the individual.
What causes it?
The causes of rape, as looked at by us, would be biological, psychological, and social. However, in an environment like Nigeria, where the causes of rape are largely socio-cultural, they are driven by social-cultural beliefs and social constructions of who the male and female are. So for instance, this environment likely thinks that women should be passive, they should be submissive, they should be seen but not heard. When you have, things like that being said and being repeated in the environment, chances are if you find a man who feels like a woman should not talk, a woman's place is, where they say it is, in the kitchen or in the other room. Those kinds of people, when they see women who can stand up to them or who seem like they are in charge of themselves, they're likely to want to put that kind of woman down.
Many say, though the crime has been on increase for years, little attention has been paid to punishing it.
I haven't heard of victims that has been justified properly, in the sense that it's individuals and then private organizations that are actually supporting the movement against rape. So I've not heard and I've not read in the news that government decided to sue someone or give proper investigation. It has always been NGOs.
In Nigeria, there are at least 5 laws by which rape is punishable. The Criminal Code, which is applicable in all the southern states, the Penal Code, which applies in all northern states, the Criminal Laws of Lagos for Lagos State, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, applicable only in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, and the Child Rights Act, which only applies in states that have domesticated it.
The punishment for rape varies depending on where the incident occurs. So, but generally it's between 15 years and life imprisonment. But there's a concerted effort to extend and increase the weight of punishment for rape over the last few years. Many states have reviewed their laws to make the punishment more stringent for rape.
The Criminal Code, Penal Code, and Criminal Laws of Lagos affirms that only females could be raped. The legal definition of rape makes reference to penetration of the vagina, and because only females have vaginas, only them can be raped. What then happens to the male folk?
I think traditionally the concept of rape is to do with the penetration of the woman's reproductive organ by a male assailant. But the truth of the matter is ordinarily men can be raped. We've had issues. Recently there was a young woman who was found in a viral video sexually molesting a young man, you understand, it is rape within the definition of rape, because rape is the performance of an unauthorized sexual act on a person. Almost all of the rape laws, but one, actually focus on women. You understand, the only existing rape law, to my knowledge, is the VAPP, the VAPA Act. That's the VAPA, the Violence Against Person Prohibition Act of Abuja, 2015.
And now to children. The Child Rights Act provides that sex with a child is rape, and anyone who has sexual intercourse with a child is liable to imprisonment for life upon conviction. But this act is yet to be adopted in most northern states. Child marriage also plays a role in thriving defilement culture.
If you have sexual knowledge of a lady who is less than 16 years old, whether or not she gives you consent, it's rape. But you know, in certain places, even in various customs, not just Sharia law, it is permissible to marry girls from the moment they start menarche. That's when they start their menstruation. It is deemed that they are age to marry, until the child rights law, you know, or the Child Rights Act came into place. You understand, when the Child Rights Law came into place, many states began to domesticate these laws. You understand? So in states where those child rights laws have not begun to be domesticated, there are still restrictions on the expressions of concern about the age of girls who are being married off, you know, children married off at ages where it's unspeakable to think that you marry off persons.
A few weeks ago, Nasarawa State was thrown into a state of confusion when a 3-month-old baby was reported to have been defiled in Adogi village. In Ogun State, a 44-year-old Pentecostal church pastor was arrested for allegedly raping his own daughter. Police say the pastor was arrested following a complaint by his daughter at Owode Egbado Police Divisional Headquarters, claiming her father impregnated and aborted her pregnancy 3 times. She reported that her father had been forcefully having carnal knowledge of her since 2015, shortly after the death of her mother.
Great mistake occurred 2017. I don't carry my daughter to hospital for abortion. I don't know what is called that. The mistake that I made, I slept my daughter 2017. That is it. So God, you will not fall. You will not fall. Nobody above devil temptation. You will not fall.
Is there a reason why a parent will do this to their own child?
This question has been a very important issue in this current dispensation, especially now that we are facing a kind of a global pandemic and there's kind of lockdown here and there, and no place really where even if you are going to get help as a child being abused in such situation, you don't really have an outlet. And so to an extent, may be having like an increase in the rate of things like this happening, and it's quite sad. So when we talk about why would a father want to rape his daughter, which is generally what we call incest, it's multifactorial, from behavioral issues to genetic problems and of course environmental factors. So let's start from why would this even happen? Studies have actually shown that childhood trauma is one of the main causes why a perpetrator would carry out this act. And the thing is that instead of the perpetrator, who is the father in this point in time, to end this cycle of abuse, because possibility that he was also sexually abused as a child, to end this act, he normalizes it by continuously abusing his offspring. So that is a very key factor when somebody like that is brought to a psychiatrist or a mental health practitioner to evaluate. You may want to find out what childhood experiences has this person gone through, what was his upbringing, what was his nurturing, is there any kind of genetic predisposition? We want to know, because many studies globally have shown childhood trauma. Another other factors that comes with it is the fact that some of these perpetrators have been found to be rejected by their own mothers. So you see the father-daughter relationship. So that rejection by their own mothers, they want to relieve it with their daughter. So that's another common trait you find in these men. Another common trait you find in these men is that they have witnessed intense hostility in their upbringing. So you see quite a number of the things I'm mentioning, I'm putting into perspective here, things that happened when this person was growing up.
According to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, 91% of victims of rape and sexual assaults are female, and 9% are male.
Aside from our physical, makeup, which everybody can see as far as you can see, it is the fact that we are more of prey. People see us as weaker sex or gender as against the male, and of course there's a scientific backup on that. We are make up with the female estrogen and progesterone, the men mainly more of the testosterone, which is the aggressive hormone, anger hormone. So they are more aggressive. So the females are not usually really aggressive. They are more of natural nurturers. So when we talk about the gender differences when it comes to issue of rape, the girls or the women are more they are seen as a weaker gender, as a weaker sex to attack as against the opposite male sex.
Rape is described as a crime which not only affects the body, but the mind.
Not everybody experiences the total consequences of sexual abuse, but I experienced that. I mean, I have the immediate, short-term consequences and then the long-term consequences. So my life spanned, carrying a lot of pain, moving with not really advancing anything I was doing, just circling around, and then of course dating very interesting people. You're always looking for abuse in a sort of way, but eventually for me it just turned around that I got born again. That was one, but secondly, that was not just it. I had to work on my self-esteem. It was much more for me a self-esteem issue. I carry so much, but then I can't even see what I'm carrying because it's been distorted. So I don't have a very good image of myself, which is what happens to a lot of survivors. A lot of survivors go through that because when it happens to you, you either try to look for why did it happen to me, and then you self-internalize it, making every excuses that you were actually responsible for abuse. I mean, for a child, you just find, because I experienced continuous abuses from different people. And that's why when I eventually started working in it, I had a bit of insight into some of the dynamics as a personal experience to know the dynamics. And when I began to go through researches that have been done, I found myself in those researches. So what they were saying, it was very much things I had experienced as a person. But then at the point, of course I did go to therapy as well, but I will still say it was just for me, it was God.
I spoke with two women who had gone through a lot in a turbulent world.
It's not a pleasant thing to remember. I was barely a teenager, between the ages of 8 and 14. So I think it's called statutory rape because it's less of force and more of coercing. Growing up, I had a lot of relatives living with us. The kind of people that, your dad will say, come from the village, no worry, you can stay in my house. So I had a few uncles who thought it was a good idea to put their fingers into my... And so growing up, it was, who do I tell? I thought to tell my mom, but I actually did tell her. And she said, tell your dad. But as unfortunately as it would be, I do not know what came over my dad. He had that same behavior. And so, growing up, I told her about the uncles, I didn't tell her about the dad. There was an incident that I always remember. Children steal a lot, right? So I stole a lot of things. And my aunt says to me, I'm tired of correcting you, I'll report it to your dad. And so she does report me to my dad. And he takes me on a car ride. And that's supposed to discipline me. But that car ride wasn't in any way to discipline me. He takes me to a shop. He tells me, take any biscuit you want. It was biscuit I stole. Take any biscuit you want. And so I fill my trolley with biscuits. And on the ride back home, the same thing that I should be reporting to him happened. So this goes on for years until I finish secondary school. It didn't go until I finished secondary school, going on until JS 1 or 2. But between JS 1 and 2 till I finished secondary school, I realized something went wrong. And so I became rude, very rude to my parents, my dad especially. And nobody could understand why I was rude to him. Then I finished secondary school. Then I had the courage to call my mom. Mom, this is what happened, this is what happened. Maybe I'm too Oyibo, but I expected my mom to just get angry, pack her load, report the man to wherever it should be reported to. What did she do? She took me to a church. I think it was a Catholic church, I'm not sure. Took me to a church like a monastery for the sisters there to counsel me, pray for me, advise me. Then we go home and the gentleman apologizes to me. But in my mind, that was not what I expected. It was, did she value the home more than me? Coincidentally, my dad died a few years after that. So I can't say if I forgave him or I didn't forgive him. But it's not a pleasant thing to remember.
My story started when I was 7. Okay. I lost my parents I lost my dad when I was 4 and my mom, I was 6. I was going to 7. So it happened when we were being moved from one family house to the other. We don't have a stable apartment yet. Like the fathers want to say, oh, bring them to us, the mother side, bring them to us. So we're going back and forth like that. That was when my abuse happened, and it was perpetrated by my own uncle. When it happened then, I didn't really know I was being abused. So I didn't understand what happened to me. I just knew something happened to me. And after then, while growing up, when I'm playing with my peers, I love to say, okay, boys and girls, come together. I just want them to sleep on each other. But these sexual behaviors, those are some of the effects of sexual abuse. Nobody noticed them. But then I just knew somehow, when I grew, I was 21 when I first spoke about my abuse. That was 3 years ago. And why did I even speak about it? I started getting flashes of what happened to me. I started remembering them because for some years I didn't really remember. So when I started remembering them, I was like, okay, so why am I remembering this? There are always triggers. Like when I hear of a child sexual abuse case, I get triggered. I feel down psychologically. I cannot, even if I'm on a project, I can't continue because it's as if it just happened to me again. So it's always like that when there's a story of rape, I shut out. I can't even continue what I'm doing. So most times when people call me to report child sexual abuse cases, I just refer them to other people because emotionally I cannot cope with the emotional pain that comes with it.
Statistics from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center indicate that rape is the most underreported crime, as 63% of it is not reported to the police.
Before they come, they may have experienced other victimization in terms of maybe stigma and being blamed, being judged, not even knowing where to go to. So those things also affect them apart from the sexual abuse experience itself.
We live in an environment where people would largely blame the female for getting raped. Oh, what was she doing there? Why was she wearing what she was wearing? Oh, it must have been something she said. Why was she even in this person's company? Those kinds of things will continue to enable rape in the environment. So it's one of the reasons why people will not even come out to tell their stories. It would interest you that even in the UK, about 18% of people who were raped are only the ones that come forward. Out of 18% of those who were raped, a third of them will report to the police. A third of those cases will eventually make it to a court. And even when the cases make it to a court, just about a third of those cases will have the perpetrator convicted. So when the individuals who are raped think about all those things, how the legal system possibly doesn't work, how it's not fast enough for them, they'll probably think it's probably better to keep quiet.
Why is this the case? For male victims, a common theme that emerges as why is a lost sense of manliness. Male victims voice their concern in reconciling their masculine identity with the experience of being raped.
Few of them still come out, and that does not have anything to do with the response of facilities available. It has to do with the man thing, still the patriarchal thing. I mean, a guy doesn't say somebody had raped me. How can a man come and say my wife beats me up? You know, how can a man come and say so? But interesting enough, they are stepping out. We are having men who are opening up. My wife, see, I'm being beaten by my wife. I'm actually the one who's on the beating side. I'm actually being raped. In MediaCom, we've had cases of male rape that we've dealt with. You know, we've had men who have come up later just for their medical checkup to say I was violated and I'm beginning to feel funny. I think maybe something might happen to me. The male cases we have handled, none of them went to court.
Why does male gender find it difficult to speak up? Because people will not believe them. I mean, they don't believe women, how much more men? So there had been a general notion about if a man went out and reported at the police station that he was beaten by his woman, it would be seen as a joke.
We have received and supported male survivors too. Children, I mean boys, and also young men, some in their 30s, some in their 20s, who were also sexually abused by fellow men. And this sexual abuse that we're talking about is not only men also that can rape or sexually abuse. We've also had cases where female abusers were alleged to have abused survivors. And our boys, our men, probably from their homes, they are not well sensitized in terms of reporting, you know, knowing what an abuse is, that thing that auntie is doing to you is an abuse, okay, and that this is the way that you should go about reporting it, or even listening to them, making ourselves available to them, listening to them, knowing that yes, what they are saying is true, and then believing their story, you know. So it happens to men too, but we have to check all these beliefs, all these traditions, all these misconceptions that surround, and all these myths that surround male survivors, knowing that they can suffer, and then they can suffer it more because they might not be very expressive like the female folks.
We've discovered over time that the perpetrators are people mostly close to the survivors.
I had a trigger. There was a particular rape I never remembered. Somehow it's been buried, you know, but I had a flash.